Database locking is a mechanism that prevents concurrent access to data in order to ensure data integrity and consistency. Many database professionals know that database locking doesn't work alone, and locks can be either optimistic or pessimistic. When optimistic locking is in use, a record is locked only when changes are being committed, while pessimistic locking refers to your database locking records while they are being worked on or edited. In both locking models, your database will release a lock once changes will be committed to the database. Optimistic locking allows many developers or users to work on things concerning the database concurrently and issues a version towards each transaction in the database. Then, once an imaginary person B tries to commit his changes to data, the database notices that the version of the record has changed because of the actions initiated by the person A and aborts the transaction. As a result, the transaction initiated by the person B will fail with a concurrency exception and it will have to be launched again. Thus, optimistic locking ensures that no changes are lost. Pessimistic locking means that if a person A is updating the data, the records are locked. Records are only unlocked once the person A finishes his work and the database releases the lock. Pessimistic locking ensures that updates are processed one at a time and it prevents data from being overwritten. The idea of optimistic locking is to prevent conflicts between transactions by detecting them and aborting the transaction if they are detected. This type of locking is called optimistic because developers are being optimistic by assuming that the chance of conflict between a transaction A and a transaction B is very low. This type of locking works best when there are many records and relatively few users. The idea of pessimistic locking is that it assumes that conflicts are going to happen and prevents them by locking the data immediately, typically when the data is read. Other transactions must then wait until the lock is released. Consider using optimistic locking if most operations read data but infrequently update it. Optimistic locking is also useful in microservices where multiple services are accessing the same data and conflict is not likely to happen, but it is possible. Optimistic locking is useful and efficient for applications or systems with rare conflicts. It doesn't require the holding of database locks, it doesn't produce deadlocks, and allows simultaneous access to the same dataset. Consider using pessimistic locking if you think that data consistency is more important than speed, when the time to hold the lock for the database is minimal, or when you find yourself infrequently updating data, as pessimistic locking will immediately save your changes. Pessimistic locking guarantees data integrity by preventing any and all conflicts, especially in high conflict scenarios. It ensures the safety of operations where losing data is not an option and prevents cascading failures in systems with critical datasets. The decision on which locking mechanism to choose largely depends on your specific use case and requirements of your application, so make sure to evaluate your use case and requirements carefully and choose the locking mechanism responsibly.